Plant 5 nut trees, once, and you'll never need to buy food again. Not for yourself, not for your children, not for your grandchildren, not even for theirs. I know how that sounds, but what I'm about to show you has been quietly growing behind human civilization for thousands of years. Trees so productive, so ancient, so self-sustaining, that historically owning just one was considered a legal guarantee against starvation. These aren't annual crops. You don't replant them. You don't pray the weather cooperates or the grocery store stays open. These are perennial food machines, trees that go deeper and stronger every single year, producing tens of thousands of calories from a single canopy, needing almost nothing from you after planting. One mature black walnut, enough calories to sustain a person for months. One chestnut tree, 200 to 400 pounds of starchy grain-like nuts per season, a small wheat crop hanging from branches. One oak, up to 1,000 pounds of acorns in a good year, for 500 years. You won't be alive when it peaks, but your grandchildren will be. That's the whole point. Stay with me to tree number 4, because that one completely changed how I think about long-term food security. It produces something most people have never eaten, outperforms wheat, corn, and rice nutritionally combined, and thrives in soil most crops would refuse to touch. Don't skip ahead, it's worth the wait. Here are the 5 nut trees you plant once, so your grandchildren never go hungry. Tree number 1, hazelnut, the early bird that never stops giving. Let's start with the tree that rewards you first. Here's the truth nobody tells you about long-term food forests. The hardest part isn't the planting, it's waiting. Most nut trees take a decade before they give you anything worth harvesting. That gap between planting and payoff, that's where most people quit. The hazelnut refuses to let that happen. Plant a grafted hazelnut today, in 3 to 5 years, you're harvesting. Not a handful, a real harvest. From a shrub that keeps producing for the next 40 to 60 years without asking much in return. Here's what most people miss. We think of calorie security in terms of vegetables, tomatoes, zucchini, leafy greens. Those have their place, but they are not the foundation of food independence. You cannot survive a hard winter on zucchini. You cannot fuel a working body through cold months on lettuce. What a body needs when food gets scarce is fat and protein. That's exactly what the hazelnut delivers. 1 pound of hazelnuts, 2,800 calories, dense, shelf-stable, nutrient-rich. A mature shrub just 5 to 15 feet tall yields 30 pounds per season. That's over 84,000 calories a year, from one plant. One plant you watered a few times when it was young and then left alone. The nutritional profile backs it up. Sky-high vitamin E, magnesium, and manganese. The micronutrients that support immune function, nerve health, and bone density. In a food security scenario, these aren't extras. They're the difference between surviving and actually thriving. Now the storage. This is where the hazelnut separates from almost everything else you can grow. Fresh fruit rots. Vegetables need canning, fermenting, and freezing to last more than a few weeks. Hazelnuts in their shells, kept cool and dry, over a year. No refrigeration, no technology. This isn't modern food science. This is ancient resilience. Historical records show European communities surviving complete grain failures, entire seasons with no wheat, because their hazelnut harvests filled the gap. The fats and calories in those shells kept families alive through winters that would have otherwise meant starvation. That wasn't luck. That was the result of people who were planted with multi-generational thinking. Before you plant, 3 things. 1. Hazelnuts are wind-pollinated. A single shrub gives you empty shells. Plant at least 2, ideally 3, genetically distinct varieties with overlapping pollen periods. Get that right and cross-pollination happens on its own for free. 2. Go with hybrid varieties, Native American hazel crossed with European filbert. faster production, larger nuts, better disease resistance. 3. Hazelnuts are shade tolerant. A fence line, a building edge, partial sun, they'll work it. Less sun means less harvest, but they'll grow where other food trees won't. Their dense, suckering habit also makes them extraordinary windbreaks, a living fence that feeds you while protecting everything else in your food forest. The hazelnut won't outlive your great-grandchildren, but it will feed you reliably, generously, for half a century. And it'll be ready before any other tree on this list takes its first breath. That's why it goes first. Tree number 2, chestnut, the bread that grows on branches. For most of human history, there was no grocery store, no wheat delivery, no industrial supply chain keeping flour on the shelf. And yet, entire civilizations fed themselves through brutal winters, through failed harvests, through famine years that wiped out every other crop. Their secret was a tree. The chestnut earned a nickname that tells you everything: the bread tree. Not because it tasted like bread, because it replaced bread, delivering the same dense, starchy, filling carbohydrates that wheat and corn provide, growing from a canopy instead of a field, requiring no plowing, no replanting, no annual labor. Mountain communities across Italy, France, and China built their entire food systems around chestnut forests. When wheat failed, the chestnut didn't. When grain markets collapsed, the chestnut kept dropping its harvest, indifferent to economic chaos, indifferent to drought, indifferent to the disruptions that sent annual crop systems into crisis. That resilience isn't an accident. It's what perennial food systems do. Here's what makes the chestnut unique among every tree on this list. Every other tree here is predominantly fat and protein. The chestnut is something different entirely. It's high in complex carbohydrates, closer to a potato or a grain than a nut. Roughly 45 grams of carbs per 100 grams, exceptional vitamin C at 77% of your daily value, and meaningful folate that most survival food sources simply can't match. A mature tree yields 200 to 400 pounds of nuts per season, roasted whole, boiled into stews, dried and ground into a gluten-free flour that stores for months and bakes into bread, pancakes, pasta. In a long-term food security scenario, that flour alone is what separates a family that's merely surviving from one that's genuinely eating well. Now, what every chestnut grower needs to understand. The Native American chestnut was once one of the most dominant trees on the continent. Settlers described forests turning white with its flowers each spring. 4 billion trees. Then came chestnut blight, a fungal pathogen introduced from imported Asian stock. By 1950, functionally gone. But the story doesn't end there. Plant breeders crossed surviving American chestnuts with the naturally resistant Chinese chestnut, Castanea mollissima. The result? Blight-resistant hybrids that grow fast, begin yielding in just 3 to 5 years, and carry a built-in survival mechanism the original species lacked. If blight kills the trunk, the root system survives. It sends up new shoots. The tree resets. This is not a plant that gives up. By year 7, a young hybrid orchard produces 100 pounds per acre. By year 10, 2,000 pounds per acre. One practical warning before you plant. Chestnuts drop inside intensely spiky husks that punch straight through the sole of a shoe. Keep them away from high-traffic areas, play spaces, anywhere children run barefoot. Plant where the harvest can fall freely and be gathered safely. In a food forest, chestnuts pair beautifully with grazing animals. Sheep and pigs work the orchard floor, consuming fallen nuts, returning fertility to the soil. The kind of elegant, self-reinforcing system ancient farmers understood intuitively, and modern agriculture has almost entirely forgotten. The chestnut fed civilizations for centuries. It's ready to feed yours. 2 trees down. The hazelnut feeds you in 3 years and stores its harvest through winter, no refrigerator, no technology. The chestnut replaces bread for entire civilizations and rebuilds itself from the roots even when disease takes the trunk. But we're barely halfway. The next 3 trees are where this shifts from practical to genuinely generational. These are the trees you plant not just for yourself, but for the people who will stand on this same ground long after you're gone. Stay with me, tree number 4 is still coming, and I promise it's worth it. Quick question before we continue. Are you someone who thinks in decades rather than seasons? Who looks at a piece of land and sees not what it is, but what it could become 50 years from now? If that's you, subscribe. Everything on this channel is built around that kind of thinking. Hit subscribe and drop hope in the comments. I read every single one. Tree number 3, walnut, the black gold of the homestead. Now the walnut. There's a reason it's called black gold, and it has nothing to do with timber prices, though that part of the story is extraordinary on its own. It has to do with what a single mature walnut quietly produces, year after year, for up to 200 years. A mature walnut yields 50 to 80 pounds of nuts annually. At roughly 3,000 calories per pound of kernel, that's somewhere between 150,000 and 240,000 calories every single year. Enough fat and protein to form the nutritional backbone of a family's diet through seasons when everything else runs thin. Walnuts are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, protein, potassium, phosphorus, iron, and selenium. In a self-sufficient food system, no meat every day, no dairy on demand, those nutrients aren't optional. They're what keeps a body functioning at full capacity through hard physical work in cold months. And the storage. The hard shell is nature's own airtight container, fresh and nutritionally intact for over a year. No refrigeration. Harvest in autumn. Eat through winter, spring, into the following summer. The tree does the packaging for you. 2 varieties worth knowing. The black walnut Juglans nigra, the canopy giant. Intensely flavored, deeply rot-resistant timber. A kernel so nutritionally dense it was a survival staple for indigenous peoples across North America for thousands of years. Cracking the shells takes effort, some growers simply drive over them. What's inside justifies every bit of it. The Carpathian walnut Juglans regia, a cold hardy English walnut, sweeter kernels, thin shells that often crack by hand, faster to process, milder in flavor, equally productive across its long lifespan. One critical thing before you plant. Walnut roots secrete a natural compound called juglone. It inhibits the growth of sensitive plants nearby. Tomatoes are the most well-known casualty. Plan your food forest layout accordingly. Keep vegetable beds outside the root zone. Wild blackberries, on the other hand, grow alongside walnuts without complaint. Plant your walnut where it has room to become what it's meant to be. A 90-foot canopy giant that shades, feeds, and builds generational timber wealth for the descendants who inherit this land from you. Tree number 4, hickory, the one I promised you. I told you at the beginning to stay with me until tree number 4. This is it. The hickory isn't the most famous tree on this list. It doesn't have the chestnut's dramatic comeback story or the oak's ancient civilizational legacy. It doesn't have the hazelnut's immediate payoff or the walnut's name recognition. What it has is something rarer than all of those things. It has everything. The hickory is the most complete food, fuel, and land-building tree in the temperate world. And the fact that almost nobody is planting it intentionally anymore is one of the great quiet tragedies of modern homesteading. Start with the nuts. Hickory kernels, particularly from the shagbark hickory, Caria ovata, are among the most calorie-dense foods any temperate tree produces. Sweet, rich, deeply flavored in a way store-bought nuts cannot replicate. Indigenous peoples across North America processed hickory nuts into a thick, oil-rich liquid called paucohicora, a high-calorie emulsion used to enrich stews, soups, and gruels through winter months. Historians believe this preparation was so central to survival that the tree's name eventually gave us the word hickory itself. That is not a footnote. That is a tree so important to human survival that an entire language borrowed its name. Now the part most people have never heard. The yellowbud hickory, Caria cordiformis, produces nuts that can be cold pressed into a culinary oil with a smoke point of 400 degrees F, comparable to refined avocado oil, and far more nutritionally complex. A stable, flavorful, home-produced cooking fat, from a tree that asks almost nothing of the soil it grows in. Think about what that means in a genuine food independence scenario. You're not just harvesting calories to eat directly. You're producing your own cooking oil, one of the hardest nutrients to secure in any self-sufficient system, from a canopy tree that returns to do it again every single year for 200 to 300 years. And then there's the pecan. Pecans, Caria illinoinensis, belong to the same genus. At 691 calories per 100 grams, they're among the most calorie-dense foods in the entire plant kingdom, higher even than hazelnuts. A mature pecan lives 200 to 300 years, producing rich, buttery kernels behind thin shells that need minimal processing. In the right climate, Midwest southward, the pecan may be the single most generous food tree on this entire list. Now an honest conversation about time. Hickories are slow. Seedling shagbarks can take 10 to 40 years to begin serious production. Peak mast yields don't arrive until 40 to 100 years of age. That timeline stops most modern gardeners before they pick up a shovel. But that framing misses the entire point. You are not planting for next season. You are not planting for convenience. You are planting a biological inheritance, a permanent structure in the landscape that compounds in value with every decade it stands. The person who planted a hickory 100 years ago on your land never met you, but if that tree were still standing, it would be feeding you today. That is the transaction this tree offers. Plant it for your grandchildren. Let them crack the shells, press the oil, and wonder about the person who had the foresight to put it in the ground. That person can be you. Tree number 5, oak, the ancient calorie factory. 500 years. That's the minimum productive lifespan of a mature white oak, not the lifespan of the tree, the lifespan of its food production. One mature oak drops anywhere from 200 to 1,000 pounds of acorns in a good year, generation after generation, long after everyone who remembers planting it is gone. When you plant an oak, you are not gardening. You are founding something. Most people hear acorn and think, inedible, bitter, animal food, and they're half-right. Raw acorns contain tannins that make them deeply unpalatable straight from the shell. But here's what those people are missing entirely. Every civilization that built itself around oak forests, and there were many across Europe, Asia, and North America, knew exactly how to unlock what the acorn holds. The process is called leaching. Crack the acorns, grind the kernels into coarse meal, wash that meal repeatedly in water. Each wash pulls the tannins out. What remains is a mild, gluten-free flour, rich in complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, and a balanced amino acid profile that sustained entire populations through centuries of winters that had no backup plan. The white oak, Quercus alba, produces acorns naturally lower in tannins than most species, less leaching time, less effort, milder flavor in the finished flour. The chestnut oak, Quercus montana, thrives where most trees won't: dry, rocky, sloped ground, making it the ideal choice for the difficult corners of a property where nothing else wants to grow. Here's what the nutritional profile actually looks like. White oak acorns, approximately 387 calories per 100 grams, 41 grams of complex carbohydrates, 6 grams of protein, 24 grams of healthy fats, a complete macronutrient profile from a single wild food source: carbohydrates for energy, fat for warmth and cellular function, protein for repair and strength. Pair that with the chestnut's flour, the walnut's omega-3 density, the hickory's pressed oil, and the hazelnut's shelf-stable caloric punch, and these 5 trees together form something remarkable. A complete nutritional system, growing quietly in the background of your land, building deeper roots every decade, requiring nothing from industrial supply chains to keep functioning. One more thing about the oak, and it deserves to be said plainly. A mature oak is not just a food source. It is an ecological keystone, supporting more species of moths, butterflies, birds, and beneficial insects than almost any other temperate tree on Earth. Planting an oak isn't just an act of food security. It is an act of ecological restoration. You are not just feeding your family. You are rebuilding something the modern landscape has been quietly dismantling for 100 years. 5 trees, 1 planting season, a food system that outlasts you, your children, and their children after them. The hazelnut feeds you in 3 years, stores through winter without any technology at all. The chestnut replaced bread for entire mountain civilizations, rebuilds itself from the roots when disaster strikes. The walnut, 250,000 calories per tree per year, timber wealth that compounds for 2 centuries. The hickory, cooking oil, survival calories, a legacy crop that peaks long after you're gone. The oak anchors the entire system with a food source so ancient, so proven, so self-sustaining that it outlasts every other living thing you will ever plant. None of this requires a farm. None of it requires expertise. It requires a long view. There's a saying in agroforestry that captures it perfectly. Hazelnuts and chestnuts are planted for yourself, walnuts for your children, hickories and oaks for your grandchildren. Plant all 5, and you are doing something rare in this world. You are thinking about centuries. Which of these 5 are you planting first? Drop it in the comments and tell me what zone you're growing in. I want to help you choose the right varieties for your specific climate. I read every single comment. If this video gave you something worth keeping, hit like, share it with someone serious about building a real food legacy, and subscribe if you haven't already. The best time to plant these trees was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.